All right, we have slides. So yes, my name is Paweł Zajączkowski. That's a difficult surname to pronounce in Polish, of course. I'm very happy to see you here, especially at this late time. It's 7 p.m. You could have been doing many things aside from being here, but you choose to come to my lecture, so I'm really appreciating this. All right, so for a brief introduction, my brief background, let's say, I was doing a lot of coding in Java, but then I migrated to dark side, and now I'm taking care of several teams of developers and DevOps folks at Xibia, Poland. And the topic today is the story about impostor syndrome in our industry. So there's a plan, but first I would like to ask you, who of you actually knows what is impostor syndrome and how this works? Okay, we have a few people, but you still chose to come here and learn more. That's awesome. All right. So we'll start with a little bit of background. So what is impostor syndrome, to be on the same page? What is not an impostor syndrome? Who should be concerned? What's the story behind this? Then we are going to look into the mind of a person with impostor syndrome. We will see how they think. Okay? Then we'll explore some risks. So what bad things can happen? What dark places we can go to with impostor syndrome? Then a little, let's say, a number of psychological mechanisms that understanding those will be helpful by itself, to get over impostor syndrome. But aside from that, I will give you some concrete tips what you can actually do to help yourself. All right, so let's start with our background. What is impostor syndrome? They say that it's a psychological pattern or mild personality dysfunction where a person doubts their skills, abilities, intelligence to do their job, basically. So for instance, you are a senior developer and you don't believe that you should have been promoted to senior, or you are a junior developer and you don't believe you should be hired in the first place, right? So you don't believe you are good enough to do your job. It takes a lot of time, so it's prolonged, right? It's not a short symptom, but it takes a lot of time. And basically, you're afraid that somebody at some point will find out that you are an imposter, right? You will be discovered and you will lose everything. They will take everything away from you, right? You will lose your job, maybe you will be demoted, your wife leaves you, your dog leaves you, and it will be terrible, right? So this is the general idea. The science behind this, there was a research in the 70s done by Pauline Clance and Susan Eames, and those two ladies, well, they were researching the environment of high-achieving women. Initially, it was thought that impostor syndrome was about women, but in the later research, it turns out that men are affected as well, right? And so they were doing a research in those high-achieving women environment. So in academia, like doctors, professors with a lot of scientific work, and also in business, so some directors, CEOs, etc. And there was this common theme that they thought that, hey, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, I'm an impostor, and somebody at some point will discover that I'm a fraud, right? And I will lose everything. Okay, so who should be concerned? Basically, if you look at the science, it's between 50 to 80, even 90% of people at some point in their life, right? At some point. It can happen at any point of your career. It can happen at the beginning when you are just a junior developer and you think that, hey, I don't know anything, right? I don't have practical experience. It can happen when you are switching the career. You go from tester to developer, from developer to architect or manager or something like this, right? Something changes and you are not sure about your skills. And especially, it can happen when you are somewhere high in your career, right? You are like a super senior developer, right? This, how do we call them? Like staff engineer, for instance, right? Or maybe you're a high director or some CEO or some C-level executive, or maybe a popular author who wrote millions of books, right? So there's a big pressure if you are really high in your career. Okay, it's connected with intelligence. So if intelligent people generally have often this thing that they are thinking a lot what wrong can happen, right? We are overthinking, we are thinking on possibilities, and it's not really helpful often. It's connected with perfectionism. So if you think that something is either perfect or zero or trash, then naturally something is very good, then you just run this down to zero and it's bad, right? And if you do bad stuff, low quality, then you don't feel very well about this. And if we speak about the big five. There is this big five personality traits, and there is a trait called neuroticism. This means that you are a very nervous person, so you have a lot of fear in you, you're afraid that something will happen, you think about all those possibilities. And if you have this high neuroticism, you're emotionally unstable, then there is a high risk to have this high impostor syndrome. Now, what is not an impostor syndrome? So it's not about being an actual impostor, right? If you just lie to somebody that you can do something, but you can't, you are just an impostor. You don't have impostor syndrome, okay? It's not about momentary doubt, because all of us from time to time have this doubts that, hey, I'm not really good, I'm not doing a good job, I suck, they will discover that something, right? But this happens to most of us, but impostor syndrome happens if it's really prolonged, right? If it's months, even years, right? It's not a mental illness per se, so there is no like a code, right? There's the ICD list of codes for illnesses, and there is no impostor syndrome yet, at least, because I read in some British research that they are actually considering this, classifying impostor syndrome as mental illness. It's not humbleness, right? Humbleness is a nice trait per se. If you don't have a very big ego, right, you're humble. But if you are too humble, right, it can stop you from doing nice things, right? You don't learn stuff, you don't propose some stuff. It basically stops your career or halts your career, and it's not very good. And as mentioned, it's not really specific to women. There is some meta-research gathering of around 60 papers, and around half of them mentions that women are a little bit more prone to imposter syndrome, but they also say that that minorities, like ethnic minorities, are a little bit more prone. So basically, we can say a little bit that women are a minority in IT on average. Like there are not that many women who program, for instance, right? So if you are in a minority, then you have this a bit higher pressure to to prove yourself, prove that you are good, right? So there is a bit more. They are a bit more susceptible to imposter syndrome. Now, if you Google top 10 celebrities with imposter syndrome, you will see a lot of similar quotes, right? There has been some mistake that I was selected, that I went so far in my field. Every time I open my mouth, I have to, prove myself. Right? There is this feeling that no matter what I basically do, it will never be enough, right? Somebody will discover that I'm a fraud. Somebody will see this at some point, and I will lose everything. Right, and it persists and persists. There is this feeling of inadequacy, I'm not good enough. And again, somebody at some point will discover that I'm a fraud, right? And I will lose everything. It will be a disaster. All right, let's do some hydration. So let's look into the mind of a person with imposter syndrome. So whenever a person is successful, a person attributes this success to one of two things. One of those set of things, there are some external factors. So I was successful not because I'm good, competent, I have high skills, but because something happened. I was lucky, for instance. There were some favorable circumstances. Like, for instance, I was in the recruitment process and I was the only person who was applying for the job and they needed somebody badly, right? So they had to get me. I was lucky, right? Maybe there was some deceit. So I was able to deceive the recruiter that I'm actually better than in fact I am, right? Smooth talker. So maybe there was let's say, maybe there was some misjudgment. So maybe they sent to the recruitment a manager who is not technical. I'm a programmer, so he was not able to check if I'm really good technically, right? He just thought that, okay, he's okay, talks nice, we can hire him, right? So some kind of misjudgment. Maybe some connections, so maybe I got a job because I know somebody at the company or something. And here, disclaimer, your connections in general, they are your assets. It's the same as your skills or experience, right? It's nothing to be ashamed of using connections, of course. I'm not talking about some, cases like we have in politics, when you see somebody getting some office because of connections, right? But healthy usage of your network, of connection network, is nice. So this is the one idea, right? I was successful because some external factors. The other reason could be overwork. right? So I was only successful because I put a lot of work. I put additional hours, constant, fixing, polishing, and I'm even ashamed to log this time in the, company hour sheet because, somebody else would do this twice as fast as me. So I cannot put that many hours. I will not put those hours. I did this because overwork. So either this or that. Now, we have something like a belief system in our head and a belief filter. So basically, it's created during the first 20 years of our life because the world is complicated and we have to simplify, right? We have to have some simple reasons why stuff is happening and we have to group stuff together. It will be important a little bit later, but in general, after this 20 or so years, when you build your belief system, the model of the world, whenever you get some information that does not fit this model, then you are going to bend it a little bit, okay? And if you get some information that contradicts this model, you can just plainly discard it or break it, right? Probably all of you from time to time have this feeling that you read something that is just so stupid or just does not fit with your belief system that you just, rejected this, right? It like hurts your head basically when you're reading this. So this happens to us. Now, we have zeros and ones. Zeros and ones in computer science seems like a good idea. We like zeros and ones. But I would like to get back to this idea of perfectionism here, right? So if a person, often people with imposter syndrome have this perfectionist approach. So either something is perfect, it is 1, right? Or if it's not 1, it's a 0. Even if it's 0.98, 99, you will just round this down to 0, right? And you think about your work that this is just a trash. It's almost perfect, but it's not, so it's nothing. And it's a problem in our thinking. Now, how this relates to our industry, right? So in general, we choose to believe that we are quite smart people, okay? So as I mentioned, if you have high intelligence, you have a tendency to overthink problems, right? To look for some possibilities, and it's often not very helpful. Our industry is quite intangible. So what does it mean? Let's use some counter-example. For instance, think about a medieval blacksmith. Medieval blacksmith would be forging swords, right? You can take a sword into your hand, you can check if it's balanced or not, you can check if it's sharp, maybe not with your finger, not the best idea. You can see if it's nicely done. You can do a lot of these things with a lot of classical trades, right? With artists, I know with a baker, you can check if the bread is good or not. But in our industry, it's a bit tricky, right? It's difficult to explain to people outside of our industry what are we actually doing, right? Like try to explain to your grandmother that you wrote a nice suite of automated tests, for instance, or this method has low cyclometric complexity, it's beautiful, right? Difficult to explain, and if something is difficult to explain, then there is a room for doubt, right? If I can't explain what I'm doing, then is my work good or not, if I cannot explain this, right? And this is the nature of our work. Our industry is growing very fast, right? We have a lot of people coming to the industry and they are creating a lot of stuff that we are using. So we have new version of languages, new libraries, new frameworks, new methods. We have like a number of layers of abstraction where we can solve our problems in our systems. And at some point, if you are like in the industry for a few years, you might get overwhelmed, basically, because you see just that many information, that many things that I'm supposed to know. That's so many, and I don't know this all. So there must have been something wrong with me, right? That's especially maybe important for juniors that might think that they should know everything about, I don't know, Java or Spring, for instance, right? Every method. And it's basically impossible because there's too much and it's changing too often. Okay, and we are also bombarded with this fake it till you make it attitude. So you see a lot of tweets that, I know, somebody solved a problem of hunger in Africa, right, or something else, and you just don't feel very good with that, right? So it's tricky. Now, let's look into some risks. So what bad stuff can happen with imposter syndrome? So first of all, when you have imposter syndrome, you have to constantly be aware what's going on around you, because somebody might be judging you, right? Somebody might be listening, and you might, look stupid or something. There's some risk. So you have this defensive process that is going in your head, right? It takes energy, it takes willpower, if you will, or cycles of your processor inside your head. And this defensive process makes you exhausted, right? It takes up your energy, so you have less energy for other stuff. You're more tired, right? If you are constantly afraid that somebody will discover the situation, then you might get in some kind of anxiety state, right? There's this whole story of professional burnout. It's like 12 stages of burnout, right? You are going down, going down, going down, and at the end there are some really bad stuff, right? Depression, right, for instance, and other mental problems. Okay, there's a problem with balance, because if you choose this overwork approach, then you will spend a lot of time on work because you feel that you have to just get it done, not necessarily perfect. So the problem with life-work balance, right? Maybe some problem with relationships, whether professional or private, because if you are afraid that somebody will discover, then naturally, right, you will keep people at distance because they can discover that something is wrong. So it's better to keep your distance, okay? The procrastination. So you might choose to, if there is some hard test ahead of you, some hard challenge, you might choose to, just postpone it. There is like a hardest task in the sprint, somebody has to take it, and you would be afraid. You will choose something easier, right, that you are familiar with, and you will just procrastinate with that. And this might lead to a problem with priorities, because you could just, you could be successful at the sprint if you just took this task at the beginning. Since you are competent, you could do this, right? But you have chosen to procrastinate, and at the end, actually, it might fail. But not because you were not good enough, but because you procrastinated and postponed actually doing the hard work. And you are naturally afraid of changes, some challenges, so you would not look for a new job or some new projects in the company. Right, so you might miss a lot of skills and knowledge, because in order to learn something, right, you have to get out from your comfort zone, expose yourself for some critique, maybe from some questions. And if you just stay in your cave, then you will not learn that much, okay? You will miss some maybe promotions. Your boss will not see that you are really good, right? So maybe you will not get a raise or a promotion, something like this. And your team, your company, basically the entire IT industry will miss your ideas because you choose to sit quietly, not talk about interesting stuff, and they will just miss it. Okay. So now let's look into some psychological biases, mechanisms that might help us a little bit. So first of all, the realization that there is something like imposter syndrome, right? It's not that something is wrong with you. There is this psychological condition, imposter syndrome. The second, it's very popular. It's not like 1 or 2% of people has it. It's like probably half of us as we are sitting here, right? And to some extent, maybe, probably, it's solvable. There's a little bit of philosophical question, right? Can I get rid of the demons in my head? We don't know. Maybe you can't to the end, like you can't finish them, but I'm sure that you can learn how to live with them and deal with them and drink tea or coffee or whatever you choose to drink with them. Okay, so in order not to be too softish on kind of technical conference in the end, I have a diagram for you. This is the impostor cycle. This is the central mechanism in impostor syndrome. You are running in cycles, and each cycle strengthens the feeling that you are an impostor. So how this works, there is a task, right? You approach the task, you're afraid, you're thinking that, oh my God, they will discover at this time I'm doomed, right? Or maybe you think, all right, maybe I will be lucky again. Maybe I can slip by. So there are some doubts at the beginning, anxiety, right? But at some point you have to start acting. And you choose one of the two possibilities. Either you go with this over-preparation, so you spend this additional time, you endlessly polish all this stuff, right? Not log the hours for the company, because you are supposed to do it faster, right? Or maybe you can choose these external factors, right? So procrastination, for instance, or luck. So we would say, okay, I'm done. They will discover this time there's nothing I can do, or maybe I will be lucky this time, I will slip by. You just, just put away this thing about this test that is ahead of you, right? For instance, there's this situation at the university. You are just before the exam, you are cramming from your book, right? You have 1 hour to the exam, and at some point you just say, okay, fuck it. I can't learn anymore. You just, close your book, put it away, go for a walk, for a coffee, or maybe something stronger, whatever is good for you. And this is a form of procrastination. So you don't want to think about this exam. You want to take your mind away from the test, right? So you go with either of those. And then, since you are competent, actually, you don't believe it, but you are, then you are successful at your task, right? You get a feedback from people around you that, yeah, you are great, you are competent. And now what happens if this belief system of yours kicks in and you get a feedback that, hey, I'm competent, but inside of you, you have this thing that I'm not competent. So you just, what do? You discard this feedback, right? It doesn't fit into your belief system about yourself, right? And besides, you have an explanation why you were successful. It was either because this overwork or because external factors, right? I was successful because this or that, not because myself, my competence, right? And since you have this explanation that, okay, I succeeded again because something, then this strengthened this feeling of being impostor. It was not me, it was something external, right? Basically, this perception of fraudulence is getting stronger. You have the impostor syndrome stronger, and then again there is another task, and the cycle repeats, right? You are running in these cycles, and the feeling of being impostor is getting stronger. All right, about perception of knowledge. So basically, as I mentioned, we are building this model of the world in our head, right? And we tend to group things, right? We group things, we group people, like this is a group of developers, they are more or less the same. There's a group of managers, they are more or less the same, right? And it helps us a little bit. So now what happens if you talk to developer 1, you get a piece of information 1, second developer, another piece of information, the third person, another piece of information. And now what happens in your head is all those developers merge into one generic developer, right? I have one generic idea about who is a developer. And this generic developer knows all those 3 things, right? Each of those 3 people know all of those 3 things. So in your head, what happens is that your knowledge is very small, what I know on the left, right? And other people know so much, right? Where in reality, it's on the right, right? They know maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, maybe similar, but it's not that bigger. It's not bigger. So be careful about this, this thing. Now, next, the Dunning-Kruger effect. So this is a relation between competence. Here we have competence that is usually growing with time. And we have confidence, how sure we are of our skills, right? And now, first disclaimer, we are not good in seeing the difference between those two. If somebody, let's say, speaks confidently, with confident voice, then we assume that they are competent, right? They sound competent, they must be competent, okay? And usually when we learn something, some new skills or pick some new career path, at the beginning we are gaining this confidence quite quickly, you see, right? Something is happening, we have a green path, we have a hello world, first endpoint in Spring or something, right? It's working, I'm good, right? I'm a good developer. And you go to this peak of Mount Stupid. Usually in software, I think it happens to programmers around after 1 year, 1.5 years, when you go through from junior to mid or regular developer, right? Something like that. You have this feeling that, yeah, I know almost everything. I know how to do this. I'm very good. I know Java 10 out of 10, Spring 10 out of 10. Give me a lot of money, right? And then after, maybe you change a job, maybe you see some fuck-ups in production, maybe you had some problems, you realize how broad is the field in front of you, okay? And you go down in the valley of despair, right? And only after years, basically, of training and experience, you are slowly crawling out of this valley of despair and you are getting confidence again. Right? I had this experience, a lot of experience as technical recruiter, and I often also as a manager, I had like 70 people, probably more or less. And it's common pattern, and after 1.5 years, people are very sure of themselves, right? This happens. And how this relates to imposter syndrome, basically, if you are somewhere there, somewhere further away, you don't have that much confidence again, and you see some people who have less experience but are on this peak of stupidity, and you can tell the difference very well, and you think that, hey, this person has half of my experience, but he's very good, right? Or she's very good, confident, competent, right? In reality, they are just on the different point on this Dunning-Kruger effect. They are not necessarily better than you, probably not. So don't worry about this, just think about this effect. Next interesting effect is the spotlight effect. So basically, we are a bit more selfish that we would like to, and that we, let's say, acknowledge, right? So we think that people are focused on us more than this is in reality, right? For instance, imagine there's a group photo situation, right? What happens when you see this photo afterwards? Who do you check first? Yourself, right? You check if your tie is straight or if you don't have some stain or something. And other people, yeah, okay, whatever. They are there, right? So basically, people don't look at you that much as you think. If you speak or if you are in some discussion or whatever, they are just not paying fully attention. And they don't look for your mistakes intentionally, right? So don't worry, to take voice, to speak up. People won't notice your mistakes that much compared to what you think they would. Okay, next interesting effect, the curse of knowledge. So small children have this feature that they think that everyone around them knows the same and feels the same, okay? To some extent we grow up from that, but still there are this miscommunication between technical people and non-technical people, right? We assume that people knows all those 3-letter shortcuts, for instance, and they don't, and we are kind of irritated by this, right? So this happens. But aside from that, I had this experience as a leader of Java Guild in our company for 2 years. And one part of the job was to find people who would speak at our internal events. Like every quarter, we had like a small mini conference with 3-5 speakers. And I will talk about some topic, and I was going from person to person asking, hey, do you want to talk? Hey, do you want to talk? Right? And they were shy. Many of them were shy, but what was happening often was that they were saying they don't have anything interesting to say. Everyone else knows everything that I have to say. Right? This is exactly this effect. It's not true. And you have a lot of unique knowledge that other people don't know. If you are a senior developer, you have your own personal experience. You can tell stories like, from the trenches, for instance, right, about your personal experience. If you are a junior developer, you can research some new library or check what's happening in the new version of your language, for instance. And senior people, for instance, are too lazy to check it, right? You see, on every Java conference, there is a talk about what's new in newest Java, right? Usually it's a good speaker, like Piotr Przybył, for instance, often does this on some DevOpses. And people are going to this talk, right? It's kind of, if you look at this, it sounds a bit stupid. What's new in Java? I can check the release notes and see, right? Why would I go to a conference to hear that? But people are still going and people are still doing those talks, right? So the idea is that you have a lot of knowledge that you can share, you can do some research that you can share, and there's value in this. All right, so now let's move to some concrete tips, what we can do with imposter syndrome. Okay, so some time ago, I found a thread on Twitter or X or whatever it is now. There were people in software industry, in engineering, in sciences that were saying what seemingly obvious things they have to Google, check on Stack Overflow, copy from previous projects, and stuff like this. And you would be amazed, basically. So there's a secret. I will tell you a secret. everyone Googles, right? Everyone maybe talks to ChatGPT nowadays, but people are Googling basic stuff, how to center a damn div, for instance, right? It's always difficult. People are copying the list of imports for the class from the previous projects and stuff like this, and this is normal, okay? My personal confession is that I still don't remember how to read a file from the disk to memory in Java. I have to Google all the time. There's the nested streams. I don't remember. I knew this like 10 years ago when I was doing a certificate for Java 5. Okay, but I don't remember anymore. So don't be afraid of Googling stuff. Okay. Now, comparisons. So we often compare ourselves to other people. Now, this is tricky because, if we look at this from object programming perspective, let's look at people as objects now. About ourselves, we know our internal state, right? Our internal variables, methods, all the history of our state changes, right? What mistakes we did, how much time we needed to learn something, and we don't know this about other people. We only see what they choose to show us, the public stuff. And even after that, it goes through our filter, right? Filter of beliefs, or sometimes like a literal filters on Instagram, for instance, right? Okay. So it's basically impossible to compare to other people. It's like apples and oranges. So what you can do is compare yourself to yourself earlier in time. So earlier snapshot in time of yourself. So see how you evolved, what you learned in the last year, 5 years, 10 years, something like this. And this has some meaning, right? About imperfections. So Japanese have this art of fixing broken ceramics with gold, okay? They have this notion that if something was broken, then it's unique. It has a soul, right? So whenever you think about yourself that you are broken or your work is broken or something, you can think otherwise that the work or you are unique, right? You have a soul. It might be a bit helpful than thinking that you are broken, okay? Now, achievements. So who of you play some games with achievements? We have some gamers here. Yeah, we have some gamers, okay. So why do we have achievements in games? Because it gives us a shot of dopamine when we achieve something, right? And this is like a log of our achievement, basically. So whenever you are down, you are feeling down, it's maybe a good idea to prepare for that by doing a list of your achievements. So this might be like, studies, courses that you finish at university, projects that you did, books that you read, conference that you went to, right? It can be a lot of things. And then if you list it, if you get back to this later, when you feel bad, you can see that, okay, I know this, I was there, I did that. Maybe it's not bad, okay? It's not bad. Some say that it's better in physical form. So if you write it on a piece of paper, okay? Unless your house burns down or your dogs eats it, right? It's not good, but we are we are in the industry business, in the IT industry, so we have clouds, we have 10 backups all over the world, etc. But in a way, we are still analog creatures, right? So sometimes physical stuff work better on us. Again, about this social media. So remember that whatever you see in social media is whatever people chose to post there, right? It's filtered inherently, it's filtered through your belief system. So, just keep it with a grain of salt, right? Don't be very attached to what you see. About searching for a job, right? Often you see those job ads that look like this, right? This space unicorn. There's a list of things that you should know, and it's impossible to know all that. But basically, it can be the case that a lot of that is just a wish list, right? There is not a single person in the world who ticks all the boxes. So, don't be afraid to apply, even if you don't tick all the boxes. There was a research in the 70s, I believe, in IBM about internal projects. There were actually, they discovered that on average, men were applying when they met around 60% of criteria. For women, it was around 90%. 10 minutes, okay. So ladies were not that confident maybe at that time, but in general, it's good to try, even if you don't know everything. Next, the reptile brain of software developer, right? So our brains evolved over a long period of time, right? We have this new part, the neocortex, that does the debugging, programming, stuff like this, right? We have this old part that takes care about our survival. And now what happens when you encounter a problem? Something does not work, you don't know why. Something works and you don't know why. Okay, you are staring at this and you start to think, okay, I don't know how it works, I don't know why this doesn't work. I'm stupid, right? Somebody else would know that, they will fire me, I'm afraid, right? What happens then is the old part of your brain takes over, right? Because there is danger, you're afraid. The old part of your brain is looking for a tiger that is going to eat you, right? And you change the mode to survival. And what happens biologically is that the blood flow from the neocortex is shut down because you need more blood for your muscles to run away or to fight, right? And what happens then? If you think that you are stupid and you are afraid of that, what happens is that you are making yourself stupid at this point. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, basically. Okay, so whenever you catch yourself on this, let's say, thread of thought, think about breaking this, right? Get up, go for a coffee, go for a walk, whatever. Just don't stay in this train of thoughts. It will be bad. There was this famous quote by Edison regarding talent, that success is 99% of perspiration, 1% of talent, right? What was the second word? I forget. But in general, is there something like talent or not? Is there something like that? I think that it's a good idea. People that are successful, basically, are the people who are trying despite failing, trying in different ways to do something. Inspiration was the 1%. They are trying to do something despite failing at this in a different way. So in order to do this, you have to like it, right? You have to like this thing to try again and try again. So my advice is, look around you. Our industry is very broad. You can do a lot of things, right? Look for some other things that you can do and see, maybe you can like it better, right? You can program, you can do testing, you can be an architect, you can do DevOps stuff, you can go to the conference and talk to people, right? You can organize something, you can be a Scrum Master, whatever. There's a lot of things to do, a lot of stuff that you can do. You can talk to people, organize. Maybe you are good at, pinpointing some difficult problems, some edge cases. Maybe you are just this good spirit that takes care of the whole team. It's called the glue work, basically. It's not in Jira, but it's happening around, right? You can even do this without, changing your formal job title. You can still have this label of developer, but you can, do the retrospective from time to time or something. Maybe you will find some better niche for yourself. So just explore a little bit. It's fun. Okay, recruitment. So recruitment, if you can be a technical recruiter, it's a good cure for this problem. What was it called? The curse of knowledge. The problem with curse of knowledge. So that you think that everyone else knows what you think. Right? You go to recruit some people and you see that, hey, they don't know a lot of stuff that I know. Okay, and this is a trap also, because you can, come up with some difficult questions that nobody knows by heart, basically, just to catch them on not knowing something and lift your ego. So don't do that. Don't be an asshole. Okay, don't do this, because the reason of recruitment is to get nice people for our company, right? Not to boost your ego, but you can still, help yourself a little bit in the process. So you can get nice people and feel a little bit better. Just be careful. Appreciation. In one book, I found this idea that we have a tank of sweetness, of honey in our bodies, right? Whenever some positive interaction happens, the tank is being filled a little bit. Someone says something nice, someone helps us, gives us a pat on the back, a nice feedback, and the tank of sweetness is going up, right? When there is some difficult interaction, it takes away from this tank, right? If it has difficult feedback, we want someone to do something they don't want to do, we get from this tank of sweetness. And now, what happens if the tank is empty and you try to get something from it, right? What happens when we try to get something from an empty collection, usually in programming? There's a problem, right? Exception or something. So think about this, to fill those tanks in people around you, right? Be nice to them, help them, give them good feedback, something like, put a like on the team's channel or something under the message they posted in Twitter or whatever, right? helps it a little bit. So think about this. Almost last but not least, we have 5 minutes, okay, good. There's the therapy. So if you feel you are really struggling, you are not doing very well, you have a problem, don't be ashamed to go to the therapy, right? There's a bit of social stigma around this that, hey, I'm not crazy, right? I won't go to a psychologist, but it's perfectly fine, okay? You can go talk about your problems. In many companies, there are some programs that will help you, right? Companies support this. You can check with your company, maybe propose something, especially after COVID, right? This happened because a lot of people had some problems. Now, if you want to measure, we like observability, we like to measure things, be data-driven, you can check how much of impostor you have in you. If you put Clan's IP scale in Google, Clan's was one of those researchers that I mentioned in the beginning. IP goes from impostor phenomenon, right? So Clan's impostor phenomenon scale, you'll find a PDF, 20 questions more or less. You can answer and calculate your score. If you don't want to calculate manually, there are some derivatives from this test. There is psychtest.org, I believe. You can find some tests there. I did 2 or 3 of those tests. I calculated the average. It comes up to around 40%. So I have still 40% of imposter syndrome in me, but it was much higher before, right? I literally remember running in those cycles every sprint, right? Like this sprint, they will discover that I'm a fraud. I won't do my job, right? And it was happening like for 2 years in my first 20 years. All right, folks, last slide. So this QR code leads to my LinkedIn. You are welcome to join the party if you want to, do the virtual high five or just maybe have some questions later that you don't want to do in person. I'm also on Twitter or X or whatever, and I have a blog. It's called How to Train Your Java, but it's not really about Java anymore. It's more about general software and peopleware. There's an article about imposter syndrome there. There might be some links there, like for instance to this Twitter thread that I mentioned, or perhaps some other stuff. And somewhere on the blog, I also have those slides, and there are some earlier recordings of this, also some longer version and shorter version if you want to share with somebody. All right, so folks, take care of yourself, take care of people around you. Thank you very much. Do we still have some time for question? Okay, any questions, guys? No questions. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Okay. Jonathan?
Hi.
Oh, okay.
Thanks so much for your presentation. For one question that I have, you are manager, right?
Could you repeat?
You mentioned previously that you are working as manager, right?
Yes, I'm working as a manager for 2 years.
What do you do when you find someone in your team with this syndrome?
There's a trick to this. Actually, you can basically, when you are talking to people like that, if that you think that there is an imposter syndrome, you can mention from time to time that, hey, maybe I have problem with this, maybe with that, I haven't done very well in this thing. This kind of slips through. It creates this, it normalizes not being perfect, okay? It helps people by osmosis, I would say, that it's okay to not be perfect, it's okay to not feel very well all the time, right? And make mistakes. This is what I'm usually doing with my folks that I see with imposter syndrome. I think it's helping a little bit. You can also share this presentation.
Thanks.
A little bit of advertisement.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. One point, you were talking about this like sweetness tanks that we have and that are being emptied from time to time, that we need to fill up again. And for that, good feedback, good messages from people are great. But I've struggled with feedback a lot of time, because we receive feedback from people and not all the feedback is at the same level of feedback. So let's imagine that someone asks me if, I don't know, that craft task is good. I can say, yeah, it's good, but I don't have experience on doing that task. So my feedback is not that good enough as another person that has done this task for many times. And this feeling of those sweetness tanks, sometimes with feedback from people that are not having great knowledge about what they are giving feedback of, well, I've struggled with that. So how can we really handle meaningful feedback compared to not as meaningful or experienced feedback?
That's a tricky question. You know, you can always appreciate the effort, right? It's a good trick. You can say that, hey, I saw that you put a lot of time in this, right? That's a great job, right? Even if the effect was not very good, right? There's this idea about raising children, I think, that you should appreciate the effort, right? If you appreciate the effort, maybe somebody is better, maybe somebody is worse at something, but if they put a lot of effort and you appreciate this is nice, right? This raises this level of sweetness. So this is one trick that you can do.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So focusing more on
effort, not the effect.
Effort, not
when
on the value. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you.
Okay, do we have time for more? Oh, game over. Sorry, game over. But if you have questions, you can come to me and ask personally. All right. Thank you very much again.